everyone, my name is Christina and I'm a medical student studying at Newcastle University. I wanted to share with you guys some top tips for MMIs this year. So, top tip for your MMIs, number one is make sure you do enough practice. Not doing enough practice is the biggest way to just set yourself up for failure. I know that's like quite extreme, but honestly guys, with 2020 and 2021, this applies to virtual practice as well. You really want to get a couple of practice interviews in to make sure that you're just as prepared as possible. I know most schools will have some practice MMIs lined up for you guys. This year it's going to be a bit different. Maybe they might do some virtual ones to help you practice. Try and at least have like 1 or 2 practice Skype interviews with a teacher or a friend. Just make sure that you practice something, because I know you might think like, oh, I've made some notes, I've got an idea of what might come up, I've rehearsed some answers. It's so entirely different when you're actually at your interview or when you're actually, you know, on a video call with someone interviewing you. It's so different. You really want to have some practice before you actually go for your interview. The next mistake you want to avoid is being too nervous. This one's a weird one because it's like, how can you not be nervous? That is so true. What I'm trying to say here is try to calm your nerves as much as possible before your interview, because nerves really do get in the way of you trying to put your point across. It comes across in like your confidence. It really does mess things up, and I'm like living proof of this. I remember I had my interview at I think Sunderland, and it just went terribly, like terrible. It was my first interview. I'd only had one practice one and I was just so nervous. So I think practicing also helps with nervousness because you've done it before, you know what to expect, it's not as bad. But yeah, try and practice mindfulness, breathing techniques. I'll link some down below that might help you guys, but try and work on your nerves beforehand. Honestly, trust me, it will help so much. Try not to waffle too much, because being precise and concise in your answer is very impressive. If they've given you an answer, which, you know, there's a number of things you could say, try and just list off your points. So number 1, blah blah, number 2, blah blah. Don't like just waffle and like mix up your points and like go back to an old point and stuff like that. Try and keep it concise. That just looks a lot more sleek and like logical. For example, if they ask you a question about anti-smoking, by the way guys, I've made a whole entire video on some of the hot topics that I think are going to come up in your interviews this year, so make sure to check out that video. I'll link it down below. If they ask you about like anti-smoking campaigns, whether or not you agree with them, try and say like, number 1, I agree with them because I think it's really good to encourage people to live healthier lifestyles, and number 2, it saves the NHS resources in the long run because we're spending less money on curing the consequences of smoking, instead we're spending money on the campaigns to prevent them. So try and just list off your points 1 and 2, or you can do like A, B, C, whatever works for you. Just try not to ramble, try not to waffle, try and be concise. You might be thinking that the more points I share, the more impressed they'll be. It doesn't always work like that. Sometimes they see you waffling and rambling as like nervousness, or like you're not sure, so you're just sharing loads. So try and just share a couple of points which you're 100% sure are like good points. Another mistake you want to avoid is rehearsing your answer. Some VMMIs, which stands for Virtual Multiple Mini Interview, some of those this year are open book, which means that medical schools are happy for you to have some notes open on the side or to like read up on things. But I honestly think, guys, try not to rehearse your answer. It's so obvious when someone's like just saying what they've like memorized. Medical schools aren't looking for people who can memorize answers. They're looking for people who can think on their feet and come up with an answer on the spot that's it makes sense, they've not rambled, it's concise and it's logical. In my opinion, practicing answers is a million times better than rehearsing your answers. Try and practice a bunch of questions with your teachers, your friends. Try and practice as much as you can to get in the hang of answering these questions, rather than rehearsing answers in the hopes that they might ask you something and you can recite it. Because what happens if like you start to like recite the answer, but then you forget halfway, and then it's like you don't know what to say, and then it's just awkward. So yeah, don't rehearse anything, honestly. Even like why medicine, which is like a really popular question, just have a couple of ideas of what you would say. Don't like rehearse anything. With a lot of the topics that come up in your MMIs, for example, public health stuff, NHS stuff, health secretary stuff, you can like have an idea of what you would say, like a couple of points, but you don't need to like rehearse anything. Another huge mistake that people make is not answering the question. This happens a lot. I think it happens because people rehearse. So if you rehearse an answer for like a question to do with the NHS, and then at your interview they ask a question related to the NHS, you might link the two and just think, oh, I'm gonna recite the answer that I memorized, when really that wasn't the question. With this, you really want to like listen carefully. If you want to, you can ask them to repeat the question. That's not a bad thing. I did that a couple times. You can ask them to repeat the question if you've not quite understood, because that buys you time as well. Whilst they're reading out the question, you can kind of have a think of what you would say. So yeah, try to answer the question. It's specifically, don't answer something else or something similar. Another mistake is just listing your achievements. If you watched my how to reflect on your work experience video, you'll know that a lot of people, when it comes to talking about what they've learned or what they've done to learn more about medicine, what they've done to develop skills they need for medical school, they'll just list like, oh, I did DV, I played netball for 8 years, you know, I was, I don't know, captain of my volleyball team, whatever it is. They'll just list off all their achievements. Medical schools aren't interested at all. They know that everyone is very well accomplished, very intelligent, does lots of extracurricular activities. They want to know what you've learned from these things. So instead of saying that you were captain of your sports team and that's it, try and say that you develop leadership skills, you develop teamwork, communication, all those things. So here are some more general tips just for your interviews. I guess just to kind of like summarize and bring together what I've said in this video, but I'm gonna say this again: practice, practice, practice. You really want to practice as much as possible. This is the key to not feeling too nervous and feeling prepared. If you want to know how you can go into it feeling like, do you know what, I'm ready for this, I feel confident, it's because you've practiced a bunch of times. It's going to be like nothing new. Like if you practiced an interview 5 times and then on your 6th one you go into that one, you're going to just feel like confident. So yeah, to try and practice as much as possible. You also want to take on board feedback. So when you do your practice, take on board what people have said you need to improve on, whether it's slowing down when you speak or whether it's trying not to ramble as much. Try and take that on board, because that means that you get better each time. And if you get better each time, by the time you go to your real interview, you'll just be fantastic. You also want to use resources. So there's a bunch of question banks, books, videos, stuff like that online to help you practice. There's a bunch of practice questions that you can use. There's a bunch of just practice scenarios that you can kind of walk through with friends and stuff. Practice as much of those as possible. You really want to use them, because as someone who's used those to practice and as someone who's done my interviews and is here at medical school now, I know that they're very similar to the real interview. So I'll link down below a bunch of resources that you can use to practice for your interviews and practice questions for. But yeah, you want to use as much of those as possible. You don't need to buy anything necessarily, like you don't have to buy an MMI book or anything else. There's a bunch of free questions on the Medic portal and other websites. I'll link them all down below. You don't need to buy anything, but if that makes you feel better, then go ahead. And also sign up to newsletters. If you want to know how you can stay up to date with all the news that's happening right now in like the medicine world or with the NHS, you really want to sign up to newsletters on the Medic portal and Medic News Today. So I signed up to the Medic portal newsletter when I was in year 12 and 13, and they were sending me emails every week. There weren't too many. I know some people worry about emails because it's like, will they like bombard me? Will they annoy me? It wasn't too much. I think it was 1, maximum 2 a week. It might have changed now because this was a few years ago for me. Definitely sign up to the newsletters to try and find out absolutely everything that's happening, especially closer to your interviews, because medical schools love to do this thing where they maybe will ask you questions about something that happened like 2 days ago in the medicine world, or something that's happened really recently. So if you haven't been kept up to date on stuff, you might be a bit baffled. So make sure you sign up to newsletters or just stay up to date with medical news to try and find out what's happening right now. So that is it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope these tips helped you. If you want more specific information on how to answer specific topics like coronavirus, public health, obesity, anti-smoking campaigns, public health stuff, then make sure to watch my MMI Hot Topics video. I'll link it down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye.